This is a kind of a typical demo that we'll do. We created this demo environment to kind of showcase the art of the possible. It's kind of it can seem true for most organizations. This is a purchase order system. Most companies have that, so it's kind of vertical agnostic, which is important because yes, verticals matter, and we do well in financials and healthcare and all that kind of fun stuff. But verticals don't necessarily mean you have to comply to something specific to verticals. Every organization has a variety of things that they use, and there's a lot of ways in which you can leverage authorization in every environment. So we created this to show the art of the possible. Now, what we're looking at right here is not our software. If you ask for it, and if you ask Matt for it, he'd probably give it to you, but it's not what you're getting when you get Axiomatics. It's what's under the hood. So as I'm going through logging in and showing the experience and interacting with the application, I'll be calling out where the PDP is making decisions and how it's kind of helping that along. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and log in with my first user. I've got 3 users, all 3 different personas, meaning different sets of attributes that define who they are. Okay. First person I'm going to log in with, the name is probably going to be familiar. So this is a PO system for a paper company that is popular on the television. So Michael is our manager. He's in the US. Okay. And he has some specific functions that happen in this application. So when he logs in, if I don't botch the login, good, we get a landing page. Now, first things first, this landing page, decisions had to be made in order for the landing page to be put together for this particular user. So when someone logs in, a decision does get made. We say, what do we want this user's experience to be? We have to find out who that user is, what are the attributes that define them, right? And then based on that, we'll present specific UI or help the application present specific UI. Now, what you'll notice different here, and I'm going to log into a couple people, but one of the individuals is not going to have this reporting feature because they're not a manager. Because Michael's a manager, he gets access to all the widgets and UIs and things on the screen. And in particular, because he's in the US, everything he does in here is going to be focused on the location he oversees, which is the United States. Okay. So that's the landing page we get. Now, if Michael goes and chooses to get into the purchase order system, he'll click on that tile, and now he gets exposure to all of the data behind the tile that he's allowed to see or supposed to see. What we'll see here is that every user that's in the United States that basically falls under his purview is going to be shown in this page, and it shows all of the purchase orders that they've put through. And Michael has a very specific function in here that's approving and or rejecting purchase orders, right? And that's his job function. So this list is whittled down based on a decision from Axiomatics again. What location is he in? It's the US, so we get all those purchase orders. Now, if he goes one step further into a purchase order, and we'll go into one for Jim here. Jim Halpert has put in a purchase order. The details aren't important. That's not what we're trying to show with this particular demo. But what's important is once Michael has reviewed the purchase order, we've got these buttons down here for approve and reject. Okay, now those are very obvious buttons. We know what they're going to do. If he approves, then obviously the purchase order is going to go through and all that. If he rejects, then maybe it's back to the drawing board for the purchase order person, and they've got to figure that out. The important part is these buttons are dynamic, and they're also triggered by Axiomatics, right? Based on a decision. Do we want to show the approve or reject buttons? Do we want to allow this manager to approve or reject? And you're going to see on the next person we log in with, this is all based off of the individual having taken specific trainings. Those trainings are logged in the database. That database is referenced when we go to expose the buttons. And if they have the right training taken and the certification done, they'll get these buttons. For now, we don't need to stress about that. Michael's good to go. He's been a manager for a very long time. He'll go ahead and approve this PO. It's approved. We can go back into the purchase order screen, and we'll see the next time kind of we get in there and it refreshes, we've got Jim's POs approved. Okay. So the whole experience is crafted. Obviously, the developer who put work into putting the page and making it efficient, that's all done. And that application just needs to take the inputs from the PDP on what it's supposed to show or not show. Okay. So now if I go back here, I'll go to the dashboard, kind of get back here, I'll log out, and we're going to go log in with our next user. Okay. This one will be Jim. And if I do the password right, we should get in. Good. Now, important note about Jim. Jim has just recently become a manager. Okay, so he was promoted to manager. You can see he's got this reporting button, so he can start doing the managery type things that you're supposed to do in applications. Okay, and that's great. So he gets very similar experience to Michael. He goes in to create purchase orders or approve purchase orders. He can do all those fun things. He can see everything that Michael saw because he's a manager. Okay, now I'm going to do one additional thing. I'm going to go into Dwight's purchase order. You're going to see he doesn't have the approve or reject button. Okay? And that's an important note because, as I said, it takes keys off of the attributes dynamically and says, well, if you've taken this training, great. If you haven't, then, well, no buttons for you. Now, the important part here is if I toggle over, and yes, I did toggle quickly to another browser, this is my source of truth in this environment. Okay, this is not what's going to be in your environment. Although, again, if you asked for it, Matt would probably give it to you. But for now, this is just for this environment. It's not part of our software. It is our source of truth. Consider it like an Active Directory or an IGA or a database with information about your users or resources. If I look at Michael, these are the attributes that he has. Very basic. Every organization have way more attributes about people than this, but demo environment. Okay, so we can see he's a manager. He's in the U.S. His industry is the office. That doesn't really come into play much. But this one right here called purchasing approvals is what exposed Michael to those buttons. Okay, purchasing basics. That's great. Everybody's got that. Work safety, sure, that's good. But this purchasing approvals is important. Now, if Jim were to finish his training, it took a while, but he finally gets there, and he goes and says, "I got my certification." Someone goes through the process of adding the attribute to the database. I said, oh, he's now taken this training. He's certified in purchasing approvals. I'm going to go ahead and approve this for Jim. I'll save the change. It's now in our system. And if I toggle back to the UI where Jim's making his approve reject decisions or wants to be doing those, all I have to do is refresh the page. And now I'm going to get exposed to those buttons because at runtime, we're going to go and check policy. Policy is going to say, oh, that training is valid now. We're going to let the application or the policy enforcement point know that, yes, we can expose these buttons. And now Jim can go and approve or reject POs. Okay. So you can kind of see how these attributes can be taken dynamically at runtime. They can be managed just like how organizations manage attributes today in existing systems, and they can come into effect in applications just like this. Now, I'll log out of here. I'm going to log in with one more person just to kind of show a different flavor, maybe somebody that's not in the management role. Okay, and I'll go with Pam. So Pam is your general day-to-day worker. Okay, she's going to be putting POs in the system just like everybody else. They got to get the job done. POs need to be put in. When she logs in, her experience is a little bit different, right? She's not a manager. If I toggle over to my source of truth we looked at before and I find Pam, she's an employee, not a manager. Yes, she's in the US, but she doesn't have purchasing approval. She doesn't have any of that stuff that tells, well, specifically it would be manager that would have given her that reporting tile, but she doesn't have that, right? So all she can really do in here is check the suppliers, get some help, and of course, do the PO thing. Now, when she goes to interact with the purchase orders, you're going to notice, well, where's everybody else? Well, that's because she's not a manager, right? She doesn't see everybody in the US. She only sees her own purchase orders. That's the part of the job she needs to do. She doesn't need to worry about what other individuals are doing. So she can go in here, she can see her purchase orders, she can create new purchase orders. She can't approve purchase orders. That has to be a manager that's going to approve everybody else's POs. Now, one other thing we do show in here sometimes is just another effect that an attribute can have on what we're seeing here. This comes up from customers from time to time, and it surprises me sometimes that it does come up nowadays, but it's still a thing. When individuals are no longer employed with an organization, whether voluntarily or other, oftentimes it takes a while for those updates to happen in your IDP and your IGA and in the systems that have the information about people that you typically would terminate so they don't have the ability to log into things. Sometimes those organizations still allow people to log in for a period of time. Now, if you own an application and say, well, I don't want that, and I know the individual is leaving or left and it should be effective immediate. I don't want them to get in and see everything. Well, you can't stop them from getting in if you're just a general business unit person because you don't have the ability to terminate, somebody's authentication. But you can, if you have access to the attributes, remove an attribute that would be important in the workflow. If I go in and remove the fact that she's an employee, if I spell that right, and I go and save it, great. Now I go back to my application. Sure, she can log in, but she can't see anything when she's in here, right? So I just run time right away, real time. I refresh the page. And even if you had a bad actor that wanted to go in and grab some information, if you remove some basic attributes that you're getting from a source of truth in your organization, it's going to dramatically change the way in which the application is presenting or not presenting information to the individual. So that may be an edge case for a lot of organizations, but you'd be surprised how many find themselves in a situation where people can log in for a period of time when they shouldn't. Let's get into this. How did we do all this, right? It's great. I show the demo and we get into the art of the possible, and we talk about this with a very basic application with a very basic set of use cases. Organizations can have more complex stuff than this, and that's awesome. But hopefully this is helpful. Now I do want to show a little bit of how the policy was made. Lift the hood a little bit and see what does Axiomatics expect to have for a policy administrator to create. What we're looking at here is our tool. So I know I've said multiple times here, this is not our tool. Matt will give it to you, but it's not our tool. This is actually our tool. So if you purchase Axiomatics, you get access to the services manager. You also get access to policies code, which Jamie did mention in his presentation, where if you wanted to do this and kind of incorporate it directly into your CI/CD and allow policy creators to do it all locally and test it locally and do all the fun stuff, there's a very robust method for that. But some people want a UI. So great. We got a UI, we got you. So this is our UI for policy creation. First thing I do like to showcase, and mine's very boring because I've just got one project, but most organizations are going to have multiple projects. The project is kind of a workspace for specific either concepts or groups or projects or applications. You could bucket them for anything. We see organizations have different projects for pre-prod, for QA, for dev, for prod. We see some that'll break it up per business unit, some that'll have a group of applications in one project, or maybe just one application that is kind of siloed on its own and shouldn't be interacted with other applications. You can carve this up however you want, but it is a space that only individuals that have access to that project are going to be able to go in and either administer or view what's been built there. Okay, so it's a very important concept, especially in the UI world, because if you have access to multiple projects, you can toggle between them, work on them as a policy administrator, publish them out to domains and test them and do all that kind of fun stuff, but only for the projects you have access to. First thing I'd like to go through after we've gotten through understanding that a project is a workspace for you is to go into the dictionary. Now, the dictionary is, why do you need a dictionary? Well, you need placeholders for all the attributes that you're going to be working with, right? If I look at the use case, let's even go with the use case of the demo that we just looked at. My first use case would have been a manager in the US can approve purchase orders. And I could extend that even more, and I could say purchase orders that are in the US, right? I could bolt that on and say, because that's what the reality was, is the locations needed to match. The US is US, the US is not Europe, right? So if I look at that, manager, well, that's an attribute. US, well, that's an attribute. Approve, well, that's an attribute, that's an action, that's an attribute, it's important. And then we look at PO, well, that's a resource, right? So these are all elements that are part of building a policy. In order to build the policy, I have to make sure these attributes exist. So I'll go into my dictionary, I'll unpack what I just said, and I'll create attributes for every single element of my use cases that I know is going to require an attribute. What I just said also falls into one of four categories. So before you start building your attributes, you need to know what category they fall in. The first category here is access subject. Okay, that's the individual or system. Yes, you can do non-human identities too. It doesn't have to just be people. It could be systems. Access subject is very important. You're going to get context and detail about the individual or system that's trying to do something, right? So if I know everything about this, maybe if I even look at what we've done here, I've got a user region, user.region. That's my attribute. That's my placeholder. I'm eventually going to get a value that's going to tell me that user's region. But for now, I just need a placeholder. So I'll put that in. I'll build it. And you'll see when I go into the policy creation part that's going to show up as something that we can actually use. The role is important. Training was important for us. If I wanted to put certifications in, if I wanted to put citizenship, nationality, date of birth, boss's name, so on and so forth. These are all attributes that define the individual or system that we're trying to work with. Okay, so as much as we know about that, we'll build them in advance. If you don't build them in advance, it's okay. You can always go back and build them later. But as much as you know in advance, the better. Okay, that's the access subject. Now action, that one's pretty straightforward. Your CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete, whatever it is you're trying to do in the application, you need to know because you might have a totally different set of policies for one versus the other. Okay, so action is important. Environment, this is the most popular I'll say for this would be like a date and time variable. So if you're saying I want my individuals to be able to do stuff Monday to Friday 9 to 5 during their workday, and they can do whatever they want, but on weekends I want to lock that down. I don't want anybody after hours or on weekends going in and manipulating anything. They can only do that during their work hours, right? You can have a totally different set of policies for that. And the last one is the resource. And this is where we look at, well, what am I trying to protect? I know my person or system that's trying to access, what are they trying to access? Is it data? Is it resources? Is it UI elements? Is it, whatever it might be? Well, I want to know more about that. Give me the context about it. So do I need to know information about the resources location, which is important. I think I have one for that as well. Resource, which one did I use? Resource.region, I think is the one we're using in this application. Anyways, doesn't really matter. We need to know information about that. Could be metadata. It could be if it's a document, it's in a draft or final state. Maybe it's owned by a specific person or specific team. Maybe it is classified with the classification tool as confidential or top secret, and that's relevant because a user that's going to access it needs to have that same clearance level or classification approvals. All of these is just context and metadata about the information so we can make an evaluation as to when the individual or system should be able to access it. Okay. That was a really lengthy way of talking about the dictionary, but it's super important before you go and do anything that you've taken care of this. You'll see that because if I go into the attribute connector section, which is where we actually say, I'm going to go get these values. I have no idea what David's trying to do. Who is David? I have no idea. I'm going to go into systems and find out who he is. Well, these are the attribute connectors that do that. We have out of the box connectors that follow standard connection mechanisms, JDBC connection, HTTP for your REST APIs and so on and so forth. You can do LDAP to get into your on-premise AD, and all the standard connections are out of the box. We also have parsers. Parsers are important. People don't think about parsing, but parsing is important. You're going to get a payload back from something like an HTTP source, and it's going to have a bunch of information. Well, I can't use a bunch of information as an attribute. I mean, I could, but I'm not going to. I want to whittle it down to the one piece of information. If I got a risk score from a system that said, I know all the users' risk scores and that's a moving target, well, I don't want to just get, the whole bag of information back from the API. I want to whittle it down and parse it using a JSON parser to get just the exact value. So when I go and put that in policy, I'm looking at a specific value. So I know if that number is, the user's number is above my threshold or not. Okay. So all to say, I won't go through all these connectors, but very important. These connect to your existing systems on premise, your databases, your Active Directories, your CrowdStrikes and SailPoints and all the fun stuff that you guys that everybody's invested in will go into those systems using standard connections that they already offer. We'll grab values as necessary when we run policy. Okay? And we help you build all these. And if you needed to create a custom attribute connector, we have guys for that. That's not uncommon. Some organizations have custom sources that don't follow your standard mechanisms, and we can help create that. We've got SDKs for that. The only other thing I'll call out here is the caching configuration. It's important to note that every attribute, all attributes are not equal. So every attribute can have its own caching, meaning you can have no cache, a short cache, a long cache, and every attribute can have its own setting. Picture date of birth versus a risk score. Date of birth probably doesn't change all that often unless for some reason when you were a kid a mistake was made and now you need to update that. Or if you compare that to a risk score, right? A risk score is a moving target. Date of birth, you could put a long cache timer on. Risk score, maybe low timer, like an hour, no timer, maybe if your risk score updates often because you want to get the most real-time value for that. So every single attribute can get its own cache timer. Very important. All right, I'll jump into policy here, and we'll kind of go through this a little bit quickly, but you'll get the gist of it pretty quick when I go in. This is our visual workflow. Okay, as mentioned, there's policy as code, and you can go through that and build it all within code. But if some people like to have the visuals behind it, it helps, especially in the early days of these projects. This is my main entry point. So when I go in here, and yes, I know I got real estate issues because I'm on a laptop. When I go in, This is my main entry point. I'm going to go in left to right and navigate top to bottom and go through everything as necessary based on the attributes I know from my policy enforcement point. Okay. Now, in my case, I'm going to be going through the main policy. I'm just going to jump right to purchase orders. Those are all references to one of those branches. But if I get into the purchase orders, which is where we actually were working, you'll see the PEP would have sent us information about us clicking on that purchase order button. So when I was in the application with Michael or Pam or Jim, I clicked on that button, that purchase order button. The PEP sent me this. It would say purchase order. So if I see resource.object type is purchase order in that query that came to the PDP, then I'm going to say, okay, well, this is the path I'm going down. I'm going down this path. Then I'm going to go to the top and start running through what's next. Action.identity, this would be the action. I talked about the CRUD operations. Well, read. All I did in that application is read. So this path is actually true. The PEP would tell me I'm trying to read something. Okay, in this case, what's first? I've got a couple different individuals that are going to be able to read POs, right? Your manager and your employee both can do that. They can read their own POs. That's exactly what this is for. If I go and pull the attribute for Michael or Pam or Jim, and I'm going to find out they were an employee or a manager, I'm going to say, well, if they are, then I carry on to the rule. Let's go take a look at the rule. The rule itself, just a simple toggle. It just says permit, right? In that case, great. We know they're permitted, but we've got that little caveat down here that you can't really see, but you can kind of see it's a condition. It says the order user ID needs to equal the identity of the, what this basically means, the identity of the individual. So the resource that they're trying to look at needs to equal the individual's resource. So Pam can only see Pam, Michael can only see Michael. I know that's not true. Michael can see more, but that's the next one. But individuals can only see their own POs out the gate, flat up. Okay. Now, if I go and look at more of the manager role, I'll say, well, the manager, he's got obviously the ability to go in and approve POs and see more things and do more things. So if they're a manager, they also will take a look at this path. They'll be permitted to see everything listed here. And that's going to be the resources are in the same region as the user. The user, Michael, is in the US. So he's going to see all of the resources in that region, meaning all of the POs that are generated from that region. And then the industry type, which we didn't really look at, but it was industry's office, which it's going to align. We didn't cover that in the demo, so I'll just kind of glaze over that a little bit. But as long as these are not as long as they're true, but these will be evaluated to put a condition onto it. And that kind of allows us to drive that. So the more you go through it, the more information you get, and you get these responses back to the policy enforcement point for enforcement in the application.